Hey guys, hope you are well. Came across a video from Bloomberg that came out today, 26th. Hopefully today's the 26th. Yeah, it is. Great. So it just came out from everybody's favorite organization, the IMF. Especially if you watched my video last night. I'm sure you're a real big fan of the IMF. And you're not alone. If you look, let me get my head over here. If you look at the ratio of up votes to down votes, we have 600 thumbs up compared to 1,500 thumbs down. Oh man, I tell you what, I think the IMF and the World Economic Forum need to hire one less economist and one more PR person. Just my opinion. Anyway, I want to go through this and hear what the IMF themselves have to say about Biden's stimulus plan. And then I'll give you some of my comments as we go through this. I haven't even watched the whole video. I've only watched a bit of it, but let's see what we got here.
What was behind the upgrade for the United States and the downgrade for Europe?
Firstly, it's a pleasure to join you. What we have is that in the case of the US, we entered 2020 with an additional stimulus that was provided. And that is an important factor for the upgrade for the US by almost a percentage point. And 2020 also ended in some way in a less worse place than what we had projected for the US. In the case of the euro area,
my first comment is you'll notice whenever these economists are talking about GDP or they're talking about an economy, they almost never seem to look at the liability side of the balance sheet. So all they're doing is just, well, the economic outlook for the United States is better just because GDP goes up, ignoring the fact that, okay, yeah, we might have GDP go up 5% over the next 3 years, but at what cost? Right? If you increase your income, let's say, by $10,000, but to do so, it costs you $100,000 a year, that's not a very good deal. You can't just focus on the asset side of your balance sheet. You got to focus, or you just can't focus on the profit side of the balance sheet. You got to look at the loss side, the expense side, and then you also have to look at the liability side of the balance sheet as well. And it's just amazing that these economists, they never ever look at that. They just look at GDP growth as though nothing else matters. And however you created that GDP growth, whether it's through taking on additional debt, government spending, which actually distorts the economy, none of that matters as long as there's GDP growth. I would point them in the direction of Venezuela because Venezuela has tremendous GDP growth. But I don't know that any of us would say that their society is getting any richer.
We still have strict containment measures in place. The virus resurgence is leading to a decline in mobility, which is much more than what we're seeing in the US.
I want to point out, is the virus leading to a decline in mobility, or is the government's reaction to the virus leading in declined mobility? Overall, I know some people choose to stay home, but overall, I think it's more a result of the government's reaction.
Yes. And that's part of the reason why, because we have a downgrade for the first quarter in the euro area. For the euro as a whole, we have a downgrade for 2021.
So, Geeta, I'd like to start in the United States and the stimulus effort, and then we can turn to vaccines and what's happening in Europe too. On the stimulus effort, so the $900 billion is what you baked into the outlook. The $1.9 trillion, is that just a little bit extra for you, Geeta? What would that actually do to the outlook? And is it targeted enough?
So, of course, the details, I mean, it still has to be completely settled. So it's not in our forecast. We have a very preliminary estimate that says that about a 1.9 trillion stimulus would raise the level of U.S. GDP by 5% over.
Listen, if the only thing that matters is GDP increasing, if that's what creates wealth in our society, then why are we just doing 1.9 trillion? Why don't we do 100 trillion and then we'll all just be rich? It doesn't make any sense. If why not boost GDP by 100% next year? I mean, think about what they're saying. It's just unbelievable that this never dawns on them, or maybe it does, and they just choose not to talk about it. I don't know.
Over 3 years, so that's between 21 and 23. I mean, our view is that, of course, we're still in the midst of this health crisis. There is need for much more faster vaccine rollout, for health spending, including in testing.
And just out of curiosity's sake, I wonder why there's a need for faster rollout. That would imply that the rollout isn't being done fast enough or efficiently enough. And is that because of the private sector, or is that because of the government? Question.
And also for providing support to vulnerable households and businesses. And so, all of those are important pieces that have to be addressed still. And so those are support measures that should be provided.
Again, only looking at the benefits, never, ever, ever looking at the costs. So and oddly enough, she's an economist. So just let's look at the benefits of providing support as though there is no cost to that whatsoever. And I'm not just talking about the cost from a standpoint of increasing the debt. I'm talking about the cost of misallocation of resources, malinvestment, and like I say all the time, just distorting the economy. I mean, is there a cost to giving people $2,000 and having them open up a Robinhood account and buy calls in Tesla? Is there a cost to that? Or is that just free? Is there no downside to that whatsoever? Now think about what that's doing to the stock market. Think about what that's doing to people who have short positions. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but you see, it's creating a lot of knock-on effects in there that people like Gita most likely aren't taking into consideration.
5% over the next 3 years, they're decent numbers. But Gita, do you base this on the size of the program, 1.9, or is there some specifics about the composition of it that the IMF likes and would like to see more of?
So this is, I'm just making a statement about what our estimated impact of 1.9 trillion would be over 3 years. I mean, that's a fiscal multiplier of 0.6, just taking into account what we know from.
This can't be right. IMF sees best global growth since 2007. Come again? I didn't know that 2007 was a boom year. I didn't think there was a lot to get excited about with 2007 and 2008. Maybe I'm wrong. and don't you think that's a little eerie that doesn't raise some red flags that it's mimicking 2007? I don't know.
From previous data on how much of it tends to get saved based on the package that was talked about. But again, the details still have to be worked out, and so we'll see what exact shape that finally takes.
One thing you've said in the outlook is the mutations, the new strains, and I just wonder from your perspective whether these strains that we're seeing.
I'm not going to go on to the rest of this because she just mumbles around for a while about the cerveza sickness, and it just really doesn't say anything intelligent whatsoever. The main thrust here is to understand these economists that are monetary overlords that think they are the smartest people in the room, and that us rubes in the real economy, the average Joe and Jane, just isn't smart enough or enlightened enough to understand what's going on and make our own decisions. These people just completely ignore common sense. They only look at the statistics and the numbers, the metrics that their models deem as important. But what if their models are incorrect? I mean, have any of these people predicted what we saw in 2020? Did any of them predict the GFC? Did any of them predict the .com? I mean, they should have zero credibility, none. But for some reason, everyone at CNBC or Bloomberg, the talking heads, the mainstream media, want to get their opinion on everything, even though they're right about nothing. It's just bizarre. It's bizarre. I mean, a blindfolded monkey throwing darts would be right more often than the central banks, the economists at the central banks, the economists at the IMF, and most likely, although I don't know her past predictions, but most likely Gita herself. So why are we listening to these people? That's the real question. Why do they have any credibility whatsoever? Especially when you watch my video last night, or you understand the things I was referring to in my video last night and read what they're actually saying on their website and in their blog posts.